To make our maple syrup, we'll need the following ingredients: cornstarch, which is a white powdery ingredient, brown sugar, water, light corn syrup, which is a clear, thick liquid, maple flavoring or maple extract, and if you'd like buttered flavored syrup, some margarine. The equipment for making our maple syrup will be measuring cups, both dry and liquid, measuring spoons, custard cups, a heavy duty saucepan. We'll also need a wire whisk, a straight edge spatula, a rubber scraper, and a wooden spoon. We'll start by making our maple syrup, because if we're making both recipes on the same day, it's better to start with the maple syrup. It does a great job staying warm, and if it cools a little, that's not a bad thing because it thickens as it cools. And you'll find that this syrup recipe is thinner than most syrups you would buy in the grocery store. It doesn't have as many thickeners in it. So we're going to start with our brown sugar and our cornstarch. Now it's really important in this recipe to make sure you understand the difference between the cornstarch and the corn syrup, because the cornstarch is a white powdery ingredient and the corn syrup is a thick, clearish liquid. And if you get them in the wrong amounts or backwards in spots in the recipe, you're going to have a big problem. So we'll start by measuring our brown sugar. You'll notice that there's a slice of bread in my brown sugar container, and that's because it helps to keep the brown sugar soft. As a matter of fact, this particular container of brown sugar just a day ago was extremely hard and could not be packed. And you can see now that it's very soft and packable just after a day of the bread being in the container. So the brown sugar draws the moisture out of the bread and it softens the brown sugar back up to the state you need it in to cook with, to bake with. So I'm pressing my brown sugar in to pack it into my measuring cup. Notice I'm holding the cup and not the handle. If I hold the handle and pack, I'm likely to break the handle off of the cup. But I've pressed it in so it's heaped over the top, and then I'm still going to level it off. And then I want to make sure that it holds its shape before I put it into my saucepan. So there's my brown sugar. Now the cornstarch is really easy. I just need to scoop it up in my measuring spoon, use my straight edge spatula to level that off, and then I'm going to use my wire whisk to whisk these two items together. This has to be done before you turn the heat on and before you add the liquids. We have to get that cornstarch dispersed throughout the pan so that it doesn't clump when the liquids are added. So next we'll measure our liquid ingredients. So I need to measure a half cup of corn syrup. And because it is such a thick liquid, I want to make sure I pour it into the center of my measuring cup so that I don't end up with too much by thinking that I finished pouring it in, checking the measurement at the mark, but then still having corn syrup continuing to run down the side that wasn't in my original measure. So I pour it into the middle until you believe you have the right amount, and I need a half cup. And then you need to bend down at eye level, just like any other liquid, and check it. And then we want to scrape it into the pan with the brown sugar and the corn syrup to make sure that we get all of it into the pan. Next, I've measured my water. So after I scraped the liquid measuring cup clean from the corn syrup and got it all into the saucepan, then I measured the water. So I ran water into the measuring cup until I thought it was the right amount. Then I set the measuring cup on a level surface and bent down to eye level to check it. And then if I have too much, I pour the excess out, and if I don't have enough, I add a little bit more at a time until I have the exact amount. Now I like to measure the water after the corn syrup because I feel like it just kind of helps to clean out the measuring cup and make sure that all of that corn syrup does truly get into the recipe. So then we're going to stir these ingredients with a wooden spoon, and then we'll place it on the heat to begin the cooking process. I do have a couple more ingredients that I need to prep or mise en place before I actually turn the heat on for my syrup. And that is the margarine or butter, if I want butter flavored syrup, and the maple extract. So they can go in the custard cup together, but they need to be measured ahead of time so they're ready to add when the recipe is ready to have them added. So we're going to put them in a custard cup. My maple extract, I want to be very careful with because it will stain clothing and skin. Skin will come off in a couple of days, but clothing, you may never get it out. I only need 1/8 of a teaspoon. And my set of measuring spoons does not have 1/8. So I'm going to take that 1/4 teaspoon and fill it only halfway full. So I'm going to estimate, and that's going to be my 1/4 teaspoon. I did a little too much at first here. So about halfway. It's very potent stuff flavor-wise. So you don't need much to get great flavor. And then I'm going to peel that butter or margarine chunk and set it aside with the extract until the end of the cooking time. So now that I'm ready to begin heating my syrup mixture, I'm going to cook it over a medium-high heat. So that would be a 7 or an 8 if your dials have numbers instead of words. And I'm going to do that until it comes to a boil. I will want to stir it occasionally in that time. Once it begins to boil, I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes and make sure that I boil it for the full 2 minutes. Then I'll remove it from the heat and add the maple extract and the butter or margarine. Now, it's important that I remove it from the heat before I add these, because if not, the extract could be completely evaporated by the intense heat of the stovetop, and it wouldn't be able to add the full amount of flavor to the recipe, and it would be difficult to estimate the amount that was missing to compensate for it. So we're going to bring it to a boil, stirring occasionally. You'll notice it'll get more clear as the sugar dissolves into the syrup and the water, and the cornstarch dissolves as well. And then after it boils for 2 minutes, we're going to move it off of the heat and add the remaining ingredients. Now that our syrup has come to a boil, we're going to set a timer for 2 minutes. Stir it occasionally, but watch it closely to make sure that it doesn't boil out of the pan. Now that our 2 minutes is up, we're going to turn the burner off before we move the pan off of the burner. You should always turn the burner off before you move a pan or a skillet so that it doesn't get forgotten, which would cause a safety hazard. Now we're going to move this off the heat and add our maple extract, and if you desire buttered flavored syrup, butter or margarine. So I've moved my saucepan to a silicone mat that protects the counter from the hot pan causing any damage to the countertop. You can see that it stopped boiling immediately as I took it off, And now I'm going to carefully add the maple extract and the vanilla. You can see some of the maple extract kind of clings to my custard cup. So what I like to do, I'm going to stir in the part that went in easily. But then I like to put a little bit of that syrup mixture into my custard cup and just kind of stir that around a little to help make sure I get the rest of that maple syrup flavor into my recipe. It's a little bit easier than using just the rubber scraper because any of that syrup extract will cling to the syrup I put in there rather than the rubber scraper. So the heat of this liquid will be enough to melt any butter or margarine you put in here. It'll just take a minute or so. Now this is basically ready to serve on pancakes or waffles, French toast, whatever you like to have your syrup on. And it's warm, so that alone makes it thinner. Even the syrups you would buy at the grocery store are thinner if you warm them up. But you can see how thin that is. Now the great part about that is it soaks right into your pancakes and the flavor just fills every bite. But it will thicken a little bit more as it cools, or you could even serve it at room temperature if that's what you prefer. And it will be thicker then. And the cornstarch in the recipe also helped to thicken the syrup. So if it hadn't been for the cornstarch, this would be even thinner than what you see now. So I'm going to set this aside and let it cool slightly while I prepare the pancakes. To make our pancakes, we will need all-purpose flour, baking powder, granulated sugar, salt, egg, milk, oil, lemon juice, and vanilla. We could also add some extra things like chocolate chips or blueberries to make a more decadent and tasty pancake. The equipment that we'll be using today for our pancakes are mixing bowl, liquid and dry measuring cups, measuring spoons, custard cups, a straight edge spatula, a wooden spoon, a rubber scraper, a wire whisk, a turner. In this case we'll be using a plastic or silicone turner because the griddle that we'll be cooking on has a non-stick surface. We'll also need a fork for part of the mixing process and cooking spray. To make my pancakes, I'm going to mix all of my dry ingredients in one bowl, my liquid ingredients in another separate bowl, and then we'll combine them in a special way. So to measure my flour, I want to make sure that I stir the flour around a little so that I kind of aerate the flour that's been sitting around. I'm going to spoon it up into my measuring cup and level it off with my straight edge spatula. And this recipe calls for 1.5 cups of flour. So there's my 1.5 cups of flour. Now additionally, for my dry ingredients, I need salt in the amount of 1/2 teaspoon. So I'll take my measuring spoons, find the 1/2 teaspoon measure, scoop up the salt so it heaps over, level it off, and add that to my bowl. It's a good idea to drop your ingredients in separate areas of your bowl so that you can kind of keep an eye on what you've measured in case a distraction occurs. So for my baking powder, I need 1 tablespoon. And I don't need my straight edge spatula because this baking powder container has a straight edge built into it. So I'm going to take my tablespoon, heap it over, level it off, and there's my baking powder. So the last dry ingredient that I need is sugar. and that's granulated sugar. When you see just the word sugar in a recipe, this is the sugar that it means. So I just need my tablespoon measure, scoop up the sugar so that it heaps over the top, level it off with my straight edge spatula, and then I want to whisk these 4 items together. When I see, so it says sift together, so to sift together I use the whisk, and I do that for 3 reasons. The whisk adds air, it eliminates lumps, and it mixes thoroughly. So now that these ingredients are thoroughly mixed together, I'm going to set them aside and measure my liquids. The first ingredient I want to measure for my liquids is my milk. The reason I'm doing this is so that I can also use my liquid measuring cup as my mixing bowl for my liquids, and I can have one less dish to wash. So again, with that measuring cup on a level surface, I pour the milk in until I believe it's at the correct mark, and then I move down to eye level to make sure that it's exactly the right amount. If it's a little low, I add a little bit, and if it's over the mark, I would pour some back into the container. So now that I have 1 cup of milk, I need to add 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. And because my ingredients need to bubble at the edge of the spoon, I'm going to measure my oil over a custard cup so that any excess gets caught and it's easier to clean up. So here's my oil. Again, I want it to bubble, so there's 1. 2 tablespoons of oil. Now I need to add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice, and I'm also going to measure that over the same custard cup. Make sure I shake the lemon juice until it bubbles at the edge. So there's my lemon juice. The lemon juice kind of helps the baking powder to do its job better. Gives it a boost, which makes our pancakes even fluffier. And you will not taste any lemon in the pancake, in case that's a concern. And then I need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Again, until it bubbles at the edge. And then we're going to add it. Now the last ingredient that I need to add to my liquids is an egg. And our recipe actually says a beaten egg. But I would say you're fine to beat it in the measuring cup. But you should crack it into a custard cup before putting it into your measuring cup, because that way if any shell were to come with the egg, you'll be able to get that out easily from the custard cup, much more so than the mixing bowl. And if there's a problem with the egg, you would only have to throw out the egg and replace the egg versus replacing everything in the mixing bowl. So you can see there's my egg. And we're just going to beat this together with a fork. You could use a whisk, but I really like this process with a fork. So here we go. All these ingredients are beaten together. And now we'll be ready for that next step to combine the liquids and the dries. When I get to this step and I'm ready to combine my liquid and dry ingredients, that's when I want to turn on my greased griddle. And I'm just greasing it with cooking spray. And I'm going to turn it on to 350 degrees. There are 2 ways that I can tell that the griddle is hot enough. One way is that the light on the temperature dial will go out, telling me that the griddle is ready. And 2 is I'll be able to hear water sizzle or see it dance on the surface of the griddle. So to finish making my pancakes, I'm going to take my rubber scraper, or I could use a wooden spoon, and push the dry ingredients to the side. This is called making a well. And it is very important that you do not mix the liquid and dry together with a whisk. You will over mix it. And the batter, the pancake batter, will get stuck in the whisk. So I make sure that all of my ingredients get into my bowl. And then I'm just going to gently stir together. And again, you could use a wooden spoon, or this rubber scraper works fine. But I'm just going to stir these together until moistened. So that means I see no floury spots and no puddles of liquid. Just get it thoroughly combined. And my batter should still be a little bit lumpy when it's finished. There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, if I make it completely smooth, it'll be over mixed and my pancakes will be tough instead of fluffy. So here I've got it almost mixed together. I don't want really large lumps, but several really small lumps will be just perfect. So there's my pancake batter mixed until just moistened. And again, wire or wooden spoon or rubber scraper are perfect. A wire whisk is a no-go. So once our griddle's hot, we'll be ready to add pancakes to the surface, or pancake batter rather. And it's not a bad thing for the pancake batter to sit for a minute or two and kind of have everything blend and come together. So we'll keep an eye on the griddle, and when it sizzles with clean water added, there we go, see all those bubbles? So that tells us our pancake batter is ready to go. Now, if we wanted to have some fun small pancakes, we can make silver dollar size pancakes, and those are made with a tablespoon measure. Simply put a tablespoon of batter onto your griddle. Make sure you space them apart. Your batter is going to continue to spread for a few seconds after they hit the griddle. So keep that in mind when you place the next one relative to the first one. Okay, so you can make all these silver dollar pancakes, and you can tell your family or friends, I ate 10 pancakes yesterday. Nobody needs to know that they were silver dollar size. Now the size that the recipe calls for to make the 16 that it lists is a 1/4 cup. So I just have a 1/4 cup dry measuring cup, and I'm going to pour that onto the griddle so that it all gets on there. And again, that's going to continue to spread briefly. We want to look for the bubbles to come to the surface and begin to break. The edges will kind of dry out, and that'll give us a good idea that it's about time to flip. But once we get to that point, if we think it's about time to flip, then we'll use the turner to double check that the underside is really getting a nice golden brown color. And then also, if we want to make any pancakes with things in them, right after we get the pancakes on there and they finish spreading, but they haven't had a lot of time to really begin to set up, that's when we want to add whatever we're putting inside our pancakes. So if I want blueberry pancakes, I'm going to drop those blueberries into my pancakes this way. I don't want to put them into the batter in the bowl because it tends to make a bluish gray mess when I do that, and the batter will just bake up around my blueberries. but you can see why it's important that I get them in there quickly. The other addition that I and my family particularly enjoy in our pancakes on occasion are chocolate chips. And I would add those the same way that I added the blueberries. Put the batter on the surface and then add the chocolate chips. I like this way too because it helps, it's a little bit easier to make sure they get evenly distributed in the pancake. And you can put in as many or as few as you like. So you can see that this pancake has kind of started to dry out on the top. We have a few bubbles that have popped, have broken. So I'm going to kind of get under here and just peek. And I see some nice brown color, so I'm going to quickly flip that pancake. Try not to run them into other pancakes, but that's why if those edges have dried out, that's not as big a deal. And sometimes your griddle or your skillet has a side that you can use. This particular griddle, I noticed the outer parts are a little bit cooler than some of the middle spaces. So you want to keep that in mind with any piece of equipment you use. If you did not have a griddle, you could use a skillet and it would work just fine. You just wouldn't be able to prepare as many pancakes at once. And then the pancakes just need a little bit of time for that second side to brown, and then they're ready to move off. So I'm going to place these on a cookie sheet so that I can serve them all at the same time. And then I'm going to keep them warm in a 200-degree oven until I'm ready to serve. So the griddle is a great tool when making your pancakes or something like French toast because you can cook so much all at once. The challenge of the griddle sometimes is cleaning it, especially if you have to get it cleaned up and put away in a hurry. Ideally, you should always turn the griddle off as soon as you're finished using it and unplug it just as a guarantee that it's off. And while you eat, you can let it cool. And that'll help a little bit. But if you're in a hurry and you need to get it cleaned up and put away before you move on to the next thing, then what you want to do after it's cooled slightly from the time that you've eaten or just a few minutes to have it unplugged while you've cleaned up other things, you want to take a thick dish towel, not a rag, but a dish towel with hot soapy water and clean that surface. So I've got it folded up nice and thick so that the heat will not conduct to me. Okay, because water is a great conductor of heat and I don't want to get burned. So I'm very carefully moving it around my griddle. So that was the hot soapy rag, or excuse me, towel. Okay, so it's nice and thick. And then I'm going to take a clean, just damp towel. That'll be my rinse towel. And rinse off any soapy residue from my griddle. So you can see this did a great job cleaning it up quickly and easily. And because I kept the fabric really thick and was careful, I did not get burned. So that's a way you can clean up a griddle in a hurry if you need to move on to something quickly. Here we have 3 ways to enjoy our pancakes. We have the simple and perfect homemade syrup on top of traditional pancakes with a little extra pat of butter for flavor. We have the blueberry pancakes on the left with blueberry compote and a little bit of whipped cream. And the pancake on the right, we refer to in my household as banana split pancakes. It's our chocolate chip pancakes with a homemade strawberry syrup and fresh strawberries and bananas added to the top with a little bit of whipped cream for something extra special to enjoy as a pancake.